morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on the Inside NASCAR. We're at the Atlanta Motor Speedway where the Prime Star 500 NASCAR Winston Cup race is scheduled to roll off this afternoon, the fourth race of the 1997 NASCAR Winston Cup season. Mark Martin won here yesterday afternoon in the Busch race. It was 3 straight in Busch competition this year for Mark Martin and the Winn-Dixie Ford. Stephanie Boyd is in our studios in Charlotte, North Carolina. She'll take a look at yesterday's race and preview today's race. Good morning, Stephanie.
Good morning, Ned, and good morning, everyone. Well, this afternoon's Winston Cup race in Atlanta is a goodbye of sorts. By next fall, the front and back stretches will switch places, so this is the last race under the present layout. Up next, we'll preview this afternoon's Prime Star 500 and take a look back at yesterday's Busch Grand National race. Plus, here's a look at what else is ahead in this 1 hour of Inside NASCAR.
After nearly 50 years in the auto racing business, pioneer car owner Junie Donlevy is showing no signs of slowing down. With Dick Trickle behind the wheel of his Heilig-Myers Ford, Donlevy hopes to get back to victory lane one more time before he calls it quits. Our Ned Jarrett sat down with Junie to reflect on a half-century of racing. When Alan Kowicki's plane went down in the mountains of Tennessee in 1993, many people tried to keep the former Winston Cup champ's memory alive. The folks at UNC Charlotte and Winston formed a scholarship in Kowicki's name for eligible engineering students. We'll fill you in on the details and let you know if you might be a candidate. With over a half-dozen siblings running around the garage area on a given weekend, our racing brother Glenn Jarrett decided to chase them down and find out why brothers follow in the footsteps of their elders into the sport of auto racing. All this and more straight ahead on Inside NASCAR.
Today's show is brought to you by Haviland Formula 3 Motor Oil. Add more life to your car. And by Miller Lite. With the great taste of an ice-cold Miller Lite, life is good.
First, it was Mike Skinner at Daytona, and now for the second time in only 4 races, a rookie has won a NASCAR Winston Cup pole. Meanwhile, one of the sport's top drivers is continuing to struggle heading into today's Prime Star 500. Our Tyler Potter has been in Atlanta all weekend and has this report.
Well, Stephanie, Dale Earnhardt's the defending champion of the Prime Star 500, but he hasn't won a race since. Friday's qualifying was so tough that the 7-time champ was 43rd out of 48 cars. Robbie Gordon won the pole, becoming the second rookie to accomplish that in '97.
I'm a little different, so I take a little different setup than what Tony's worked with in the past. He said I'm a lot like what Ernie drives. I like to drive a loose car, and our car just had a little bit of push, or else we would have been a little better than that.
But this wasn't Gordon's only pole in Atlanta. Back in 1990, the last time he was at the Atlanta Motor Speedway, Robbie sat on the pole in an ARCA car owned by Junie Donlevy. They say good things come to those who wait, and no one waited longer than Darrell Waltrip. Despite being the last car out in round 1 qualifying, Waltrip turned the 3rd fastest time of 29.564 seconds for an average speed of 185.334 miles per hour.
I came over here last week with this car. It's new, and we tested, and it did very well for us then. And we went back home and tweaked on it a little bit and tuned it up a little bit. And the weather really, the day deteriorated on us. You know, we were the last car out, and it got a little warmer in the track. It affected the driver the most, because I had to listen to every driver come in and say, "Whoa, boy, this thing is loose. I almost busted my butt over in turn 2. And I got that, you know, I'm thinking, oh, please. I know I got a good car. Just let me get in a good lap. And a little bit more aggressive on the driver's part, and I could have easily been on the front row and probably on the pole.
Friday's practice was a disaster for Mike Skinner, who crashed in turn 4 less than an hour in. His backup car could qualify no better than 24th.
Well, really, the car was a lot better than what it showed. Had a heck of a qualifying engine in it. John Richardson really did a good job with the engine. And I wrecked a car in practice, and, you know, we just really had to sneak up on it from there. I didn't have another car sitting there in the trailer, and the guys did a heck of a job getting that car out there. And I think I left a lot on the table. I think we had a lot better race car than what it showed.
Blown engines cost Ken Schrader and Steve Grissom Friday. Schrader qualified 33rd with an engine from a backup car. Grissom was 40th. Two new cars were unveiled this weekend. Ward Burton will drive a Gold 22 in Sunday's race, helping promote MB&A's new NASCAR Gold MasterCard. And so much for the man in black. Dale Earnhardt will drive this orange Wheaties car at the Winston Select in Charlotte. Old Ironhead becomes the first NASCAR driver to ever appear on a Wheaties box. And speaking of Earnhardt, veteran crew chief Felipe Lopez is the newest member of Dale Earnhardt Incorporated's expanding motorsports program. Lopez will head up Winston Cup development.
Well, he's going to work for Earnhardt Incorporated, and he'll start on the Winston Cup team for next year. He's really not working for anybody involved in anything this year. He's just for next year.
Replacing Lopez as crew chief for Hut Strickland at Stavola Brothers Racing is Richard Broom. Broom is also the general manager, so he'll take over crew chief duties on an interim basis. Interim crew chief is the title for Doug Reichert, who replaces Vic Kangas on Mike Wallace's FAM team, although he'll continue to work for Kenny Irwin in the Craftsman Truck Series. On Thursday, Bruton Smith presented a $100,000 check to the Speedway Children's Charities. Smith's check raised the 1996 total to a record $191,000.
Well, that was just a challenge I put on these ladies last year. If they would do this and that, and I said, I'll donate $100,000, so that's what I did today.
1 week after winning in Richmond, Rusty Wallace qualified 38 for today's race. Among the notables going home include Derek Cope, Robert Presley, and Bobby Hillen. Stephanie, back to you.
Thanks, Tyler. So once again, it's Robbie Gordon with his first Winston Cup career pole, with Mark Martin on the outside of row 1. On the second row, it's a couple of old-timers, Darrell Waltrip with his best start in a while, and 54-year-old Dick Trickle. Hut Strickland also has his best starting position in some time. He's joined on the third row by Lake Speed. Then it's Ted Musgrave and Jeff Bodine on row 4. Rounding out the nearly all Ford top 10 are Dale Jarrett and Kenny Wallace. In yesterday's Busch Grand National race in Atlanta, it was deja vu all over again. Odds makers don't even have to look at the stats to know Mark Martin is always the favorite, and it was no exception in the Steel 300. Tim Bender started on the pole for the first time in his Busch Grand National career, but it was third-place starter Elton Sawyer who had the lead by the time they completed lap 1. Sawyer held the lead for the first 45 laps, but it was no surprise to him or anyone else to see Mark Martin moving his way up through the field from 13th to take the lead on lap 46. There were only 2 cautions in this event, which meant most of the day's pit stops were made under green. An unscheduled one came for defending series champ and points leader Randy LaJoie when he felt a tire going down while running in the top 10 and had to pit with less than 20 laps to go. That put him 16th in the final rundown and gave the points lead to Tom Bodine, who finished 6th. The same thing happened to Michael Waltrip, except that he was running second at the time and seemed to be the only driver to have anything for Martin. That left only Elton Sawyer to try and catch the leader, but as usual, nobody had anything for Martin, who went on to claim his 3rd straight Busch Grand National win.
He would have had to pass me, and that was going to be hard, but he was going to really make a race out of it. It was down less than 10 laps to go. It was going to be hard to pass that Winn-Dixie Thunderbird.
I don't know what happened. It wasn't a flat. Stopped, and there wasn't a flat, and I left the pit. It was still just couldn't drive it. The thing had been just really good, perfect. In fact, was really gaining on Mark and felt like we could make it exciting, and then just got sideways going into 1, and then got sideways in the center of 1. And I came in and we put on 2 tires and went back out, and it did the same some more. So, I don't know what happened.
Well, that's all the time we have for this segment of Inside NASCAR. But when we come back, Ned will join you from the Heilig Myers Race Shop. We'll be right back.
Junie Donlevy has been in racing a long time, but I didn't know he'd been quite that far back. He's had a lot of winning cars over the years, and these halls here at his shops has a lot of memories, as we see in these pictures here. Junie Donlevy is one of the most popular people in NASCAR Winston Cup racing, and he was able to sit down and chat with us a little bit while we were here. Did you go into it thinking that it would be a career?
I didn't even think I'd run 6 races with it, to tell you the truth. In fact, everything went down the drain with the car in 3 races. We really had nothing. And we just started building from then, and I don't know, it was just a real fun game, and I enjoyed what we were doing. My uncle used to have a sprint car back in the 30s, and I kind of got interested in racing, going with him. But I don't know, I never felt like that I would stay in it any time, really.
But you haven't always made a living from it. You've done some other
Never
things.
made a living from it, never. Everything that we did was done at night. We ran on Fridays and Saturdays. I used to rebuild trucks for Trucksmore, and we put bodies on them. But never would I ever have tried to make a living out of racing. I knew then that that was worse than being a gambler, because the car had to finish if you were going to make any money out of it. But you seem to have had the knack on doing that, so you could have done it.
When you get a sponsor of that sort, was that a big adjustment for you to make, having had to do it with basically nothing along the way, and then all of a sudden you are expected to do better because of the fact that you have a good sponsor like that? Was that a big adjustment?
Oh, it was a big adjustment, because we had to hire crew chiefs, which I'd never had before, and hire the people that you needed to make this thing go. What it did to me, it pushed me background to a certain extent. Because you hire a man to do a job, you got to let him do it. And it was, I had always called every shot on, in this game. And it was a little hard, but I understood what it needed and what needed to be done. So I backed down, and I've got to give Bill DeRusher a lot of credit for making my life a lot happier and a lot easier.
What is the biggest motivation for you now? I know that you like to see that Heilig Myers Ford out there running good and running up front. Has to make you feel good. Is that the motivation?
I think the motivation that I have today is, you know, I've had a lot of different drivers down through the years, and I enjoy watching Schrader run, Ricky Rudd, Ernie Irvin. I've always been pretty close to those guys, because whenever you have them drive for you, you take a special interest in them, because I know what can happen on a racetrack, like what almost happened to Ernie. And I enjoy watching all of them run, and I enjoy seeing the new drivers come in and what they can do with these cars. And how I ever got involved in this game and watched all of the greats come through, and all of the rookies start, and how far they went with their careers. I mean, it's a pretty pleasant experience to be able to do that.
Is our sport headed in the right direction, in your opinion?
You have everyday people that save money to go to these races, and I know how racing has increased as far as needing money to run the cars. It's gotten to a point now that it's unbelievable how much money you have to spend. Well, the fans out there, and you got to worry about them a little bit too. And I think as long as we're getting the type of shows that we're getting and the type of competition that we have, the fans will keep coming back, but they can only stand just so much.
Well, certainly you've seen a lot happen in this sport, because you were in it when NASCAR really was formed, and you've been with them all those years.
Yes, sir. We have. I have enjoyed every year that we've been in it. It's been tough, but I found out from the start that to be in racing, you had to have something to subsidize what you were doing. You didn't have sponsors and all that stuff back then, you know. So I found out that the best way to get into racing and enjoy it was do the best you could with what you had, and not always be crying about what you didn't have. And that way I can say that I enjoyed racing from 49 up until right now.
Have you put any timetable on how long you might want to continue to do this?
No, I haven't put a timetable on it. As long as I'm able to get up and down that ladder on that truck, I'll keep going.
In 1997, NASCAR's made a few rule changes in efforts to slow speeds down and make racing on the speedways and other places more cost efficient for all the race teams. The biggest thing they've done on the body stuff for Daytona and Talladega, they've raised the rear quarter panels from 34 and 35 inches up to 35 and 36 inches in an effort to slow the speeds down a little bit and to cut cost where you can run a Daytona and Talladega type car, possibly at Charlotte and at Michigan. Another one of the rule changes they made in 1997 is they've gone from a standard air cleaner and a cowl assembly to a thing what we call now in 1997 is a cold air box. We used to do a lot of testing at Daytona and Talladega with the cowls and the air cleaners, trying to get the distribution right in all the engines. Well, a lot of teams don't have the people or the time when you go to test, when you only get a 3-day test, to really spend all the time that's needed to develop all this stuff. So one way NASCAR has looked at it this year is they've gone and enclosed the sides of the air cleaner to the cowl, so all of the air is forced directly into the carburetor. So you don't have to change the shapes, the sizes, and work with that stuff so much in testing, trying to eliminate a little bit of the time that you have to spend at Daytona and Talladega.
You know, the late Alan Kulwicki and Junie Donlevy seem to have a lot in common. Both are self-made men, do things their way, and certainly both believe in fair competition. Alan Kulwicki won the NASCAR Winston Cup Championship in 1992 and was killed in an airplane crash in April of 1993. Now a scholarship has been set up in his honor at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. Brett McMillan has the story.
Alan Kulwicki was a NASCAR pioneer. He showed the value of higher education to a sport in which few have traveled that path. 4 years after his untimely death, Kulwicki's message is still being heard, thanks to R.J. Reynolds.
You know, as a reigning NASCAR Winston Cup champion, Alan Kulwicki was the first guy to be a college graduate and win the championship. And, you know, it was very unfortunate about the accident with Alan. And we'd made up posters, special posters. And this was the first year we had these special posters to commemorate the championship. So what we did was took all the proceeds from those posters to sell those posters, 100% of those proceeds, and established a scholarship fund at UNC Charlotte.
Since Alan Kulwicki was the first Winston Cup champion with a college degree, and since many consider Charlotte the heart of stock car racing, UNC Charlotte was the perfect place to set up this scholarship program. I mean, after all, it's just about in the shadow of Charlotte Motor Speedway, and let me tell you, the folks here at UNCC were more than happy to be the recipients of it.
We certainly were very eager to begin with them and to continue to expand this project. But they were the ones who originally started it, and we've had a very good working relationship with them since.
There are currently 2 students at UNC Charlotte receiving the Kulwicki Scholarship, Ryan Zeck, who's a junior, and freshman Clay Hall. Both are majoring in mechanical engineering, but that's where the similarity ends. Zeck is from California. His dad found out about the scholarship while looking for ways to save money on college. And one of the requirements of the scholarship is that the recipient have NASCAR affiliation. That wasn't a problem for Zeck.
That happened at a young age of 8 when I decided that I was going to start racing go-karts, and raced go-karts for 8 years, and eventually moved up to the NASCAR mini stock division, rookie division, and I raced a Ford Pinto in 1992. And so actually I had the NASCAR affiliation the year before he was killed. And in 1993, I did move up to the late model stock division, and I've been racing in that since that time.
Zeck has had some success on the track, winning 5 late model races, including one at Concord, North Carolina last November. In addition to his driving, he's done some work with Preston Miller at Ford. For him, the old adage, no one can ever take away your education, applies, just in case this driving thing doesn't work out.
That was the other side of the story, is that if I didn't make it in racing, you know, which I'm never going to give up trying because determination is one of the key factors. But if I did not, something happen or I got hurt or some way I couldn't compete, then I could fall back on the mechanical engineering degree and go to work in the industry.
Clay Hall, on the other hand, is from nearby Concord. He's been a racing fan pretty much all his life and had a little better idea about who Alan Kowicki was when he found out about the scholarship.
Since I was about 4 years old, loved Dale Earnhardt and racing, the big yellow car, as I called it. And I liked Alan, and when I got older, I really admired Alan for going to school and being an engineer as well as a driver.
While Clay would like to join Kowicki in the ranks of engineer-driver, he doesn't think that's going to be happening.
I'd love to drive, I really would, but I don't know. I don't know if I could ever find anybody dumb enough to put me in a car, honestly.
As with Ryan, Clay's NASCAR connection was taken care of before he applied to school.
I was working with Jack Sprague some at Concord, doing some stuff for him, helping him out. He'd run out of his garage at his house, which he was my next-door neighbor for years. And then I got an apprenticeship through the school at 600 Racing, and then a little while after that, I found out about the scholarship and applied. About the same time, I went to Bobby Allison Motorsports.
As each student has learned more about Alan Kowicki, they're finding that they are keeping his spirit alive.
He showed that not only did it take dollars and cents to do this, but it took common sense and a good education to do it as well. And his engineering background is what helped him win the championship. And so we want to provide that same opportunity for other students out there.
He was such a great race car driver, and not just a race car driver, but also an engineer. From what I understand, you know, he used to design his own front ends, his own geometry, suspension geometry. And actually, the last year, I've actually started applying what I've learned in school into the race car. And, you know, I think it gives me a mental edge along with a design edge.
Even though Clay Hall is just a freshman, he's seen enough to know that Kowicki had the right idea, or maybe even more so, that he was a man ahead of his time in racing.
It is for college graduates. The technology that they're applying in there now, the engineering and designing of everything is, you have to know what you're doing to be able to make it work. And that's it. You have to know. There's a lot of people that didn't go to college and they're very good because they have experience, but the engineers are the ones who's going to be the innovation in the future and really add the spice to it.
With scholarships like this providing opportunities for young people, the base from which NASCAR can pull from will continue to grow. If you'd like to be considered for the Kowicki Scholarship, or if you know somebody who would, UNCC will be accepting applications through April 1st, 1997. Contact the admissions office.
Well, I could spend the whole show looking at these pictures on the hallways here at Don Levy Racing, but we got to move on. In fact, we need to take a short break right now. When we come back, we'll have a story on brothers in racing, so don't go away.
I'm the guy that had all the trouble, though, competing with both of these guys. But I finally did get over it, and I feel pretty comfortable with it now.
I'd like to find a steakhouse. You know, Gene's Steakhouse down in Daytona, that's a good place to go. You know, it just kind of depends on the city you're at and kind of what the specialty is. But, you know, that's one neat thing about it. You do get to eat a lot of nice restaurants and stuff. But you're on the road all the time, so you know, it's kind of like almost one restaurant's like another. So you're kind of hunting and try to find the best one you can.
I really like Mexican food or seafood, either one, but I'd say all in all, we eat at the Mexican restaurants.
Well, really, I have several around. I'd hate to name them, then I'd see a lot of people at them, so, but I got a lot of them.
Have you ever thought about how many brother combinations there are in NASCAR racing? I'll bet there's not another sport that can claim as many as the sport of auto racing. You got Wallace, you got Bodine, you got Sadler, Green, the list goes on and on. Glenn Jarrett is a brother of Dale Jarrett. Of course, they don't compete against each other, but they are both in racing. So Glenn thought it would be interesting to do a story on the brothers in racing.
NASCAR racing has become a family sport in every sense of the phrase. Not only is it a sport that all family members can and do enjoy, but more and more it has become common grounds for family members to work on, particularly brothers. There are currently 9 sets of brothers driving in NASCAR's 3 main divisions, and countless others working as crewmen, officials, and even broadcasters. What attracts these siblings to wage their wars on NASCAR's playgrounds? As usual, DW has the answer.
Monkey see, monkey do. It's kind of the way I see it. I guess for, me and Michael, he was young enough and I was old enough that he could see that, this was a good way to make a living, and I had a good time, enjoyed it a lot of times, and he went along with me, and I'm sure that going along with me is what got his interest level way up. And I'm sure that's the way it is with everybody. Your dad did it, and because you were always going to the races and you were around it all the time, it kind of rubbed off on you. Maybe your brother did it, whatever. But any member of the family that seems like they get involved in this, they'll drag another one in with them sooner or later.
Dragging them along? That doesn't sound very encouraging. Do the First brothers offer encouragement to their younger bros, or do they discourage their following?
Oh, no, I encourage them all I can. I hope they all do good. We all want. I wish it would be 1, 2, 3 every week, just like all brothers do. But unfortunately, it can't be that way, but I encourage them.
If one of them is doing it and they're pretty successful, then it kind of opens the doors for the other one maybe. And a lot of times in a sport like this, you can help somebody quite a bit as far as knowing the right people and knowing the right things to do, and that makes a pretty big difference. So that's probably just a deal where the oldest guy seems to open some doors for the other brothers.
Probably more, definitely more discouragement than encouragement. He said it's impossible, it's a long way from Owensboro to down here, and hates to see me try to get involved in something like that. It's so tough to get there. And I said, well, I guess you're right, and went on about my business. And I'm real proud that he gave me the drive inside, because when he told me that, I was like, well, I'll show you. And I think it was because of his competitive nature that I'd watched him display over the years, winning races every which way and doing things he wasn't supposed to do as well, that drove me to NASCAR and eventually getting to Winston Cup racing, and now driving for a team like the Wood Brothers. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, that is neat. The Wood Brothers are probably considered the pioneers of modern-day racing brothers. Glenn drove, and Leonard was his chief mechanic. There seems to be an innate trustworthiness between brothers, and Leonard recalls theirs early on.
And I can remember a time at Bowman Gray Stadium. When you're brothers, you know when you can believe him and when not to, but I could always believe what he said, And he went out on the track. It's his first time they'd won a race at Bowman Gray. And he was warming up, and he says, it doesn't have any brakes. The brakes goes to the floor. He would come back in the pits, it'd be full pedal. He says, well, I know it sounds like I'm lying to you, but says that when I get on the track, it goes to the floor. So I got to checking, and the exhaust was blowing back on the master cylinder and getting the fluid hot, boiling the fluid, and causing it to go to the floor. So we took all the exhaust system off the left side completely, off the flathead. And I don't know if you've ever heard one, but it sounds like a TNN model's backfiring when you let off of it, a terrible sound. But he went on to win the race with it sounding like that.
That camaraderie was passed on to the next generation of Wood brothers, Eddie and Lynn.
We try to be against everybody else, because we're racing everybody else, so we have to stick together. And like I say, I don't know of any disagreements we've ever had, hardly. Not in the last 25 years, anyway.
Not many brothers can say that, but racing brothers still do seem to have closer bonds.
We share information that you can share. You don't share anything you don't need to share, but it's important to me, I think, that he is who he is, because I can always go to him and just ask him whatever. I feel like he'll tell me whatever I ask him, but I know that I can't go ask him certain things, but age difference probably helped out on that deal.
I know you've seen that commercial too. Those two guys were always trying to one-up the other, even when they were kids.
I pretty much could win everything we did, but he's probably 7 years younger than I am, so we really growing up, didn't do a whole lot of things together until probably he was 16 or 17 years old, or something like that. So, and then we've become, I think, a lot closer since then, probably.
Now, that's more like it. Brothers forever. But sometimes brothers can get crossways with each other, especially after close contact.
It's inevitable when you're racing. know, we know each other. All drivers know each other. You have problems once in a while on the track. And when you have brothers out there, it's inevitable you're going to have a problem with your brother sometime. And, you know, Brett and I have had probably a couple scrapes. Todd and I don't believe we ever have had a scrape yet, an incident. And the three of us, I don't believe, have ever had a trio all at one time. It's bound to happen.
One thing that people have to understand, we're paid professionals to do a job for our race team and our sponsors. Yeah, we've got brothers and relatives out there and friends, but we have to race them as hard as we'd race anybody. And as far as I'm concerned, Jeff Bodine doesn't drive that 7 car, it's just a 7. And you got to race that 7 just like you do the 3, the 24, the 88, whoever it might be. You race them just as hard because that's what you're supposed to do.
And there are always two different points of view.
We had a big crash at Charlotte back in '94 at the end of the year. I basically lost the car coming off turn 2, got sideways. I hadn't wrecked yet, but he was just right on top of me and didn't have anywhere to go and plowed into me. And that's our only real good wreck we've ever had so far.
Yeah, he's wrecked me a couple times. I never have wrecked him, really. Well, maybe I did once. I don't know. But
late 80s, I began to get real competitive, and we were running great up at Bristol one day, and I cut a tire, and or he wouldn't, or you know, so he has a little bit of an excuse, but he booted me coming off turn 2, and I went spinning down the back straightaway. And then, of course, after the race, he explained to everyone that he was doing me a favor because I needed a caution because I had a flat tire.
Brothers do feel empathy for each other in the worst of times.
When I see one of them having a problem or missing a race or getting lapped or I see some grief they're having on the track, it kind of gets to my heart like, man, I wish they could do better. You know, I feel for them.
And they absolutely can agree on the best of times.
I'd say it'd have to be Atlanta.
Oh, definitely Atlanta. That was easy there. When we won the championship, Bobby won the race. That was probably the most awesome day in racing that I've ever had. I'll never forget that day.
The Inside NASCAR mailbox is brought to you by Chase Authentics. Our question today is from Betty Jean Parks from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. Since NASCAR marks car parts after a driver qualifies, but you hear of complete engines being replaced, exactly what parts cannot be replaced?
I'm Brian D. Hart, a NASCAR Winston Cup inspector. That's a good question, Betty. Basically, at tracks at Daytona and Talladega, NASCAR seals the radiators after the cars qualify, and the team has to run the same radiator in the race that they qualified with. The fuel cells at all tracks are all sealed. If the team does any work to it, they must have a NASCAR inspector present during the work. Basically, any other parts can be changed on the car, but NASCAR will inspect them after the work is completed. Thanks again for your question.
Send us your question on a postcard, and if it's used, you'll receive this fabulous shirt and cap from Chase Authentics, the choice of champions, the authentic trackside apparel of NASCAR.
We need to take a short break right now. Still to come, Clara B. Lang, an Illustrated Insider. We'll also have the Inside NASCAR profile and more, so don't go away.
Ladies and gentlemen, start your VCRs. Speedway Spoofs presents the hilarious Bees Roll 500. Join world-famous comedian Killer Bees as he takes an in-depth look at the funniest race in stock car history. You'll get inside information on viewing the race close up, where to find cool souvenirs, tips on grandstand etiquette, and much, much more. So race to your phone and call 1-800-380-7404 or send $14.95 plus $4.95 shipping and handling to the address on the screen.
We aren't able to get her on the show every week here on the Inside NASCAR, but when she does come on, she always has something interesting. Clara B. Lang on Illustrated Insider. Let's see what she has in store this week.
The Insider has learned that high-level race fans within the Kremlin in Moscow are somehow catching NASCAR Winston Cup and Busch Grand National races live. Get this, they're calling race teams long distance to talk about their race performance even before they make it back to their shops in Charlotte. Meanwhile, the rest of the Russians are getting pre-94 NASCAR races on national TV. Ernie Irvin pumping gas for you? Now that's a service station. Customers lined up for miles to have Ernie fill up their tanks in Carmel, California recently. The stunt was part of a Texaco Haviland sponsorship announcement for the IndyCar race at Laguna Seca Raceway this fall. By the way, this gas attendant even checked the oil. The Winston Cup Racing Wives Auxiliary held their quarterly meeting recently. The drivers' wives held a session in which they talked about everything from education opportunities for racetrack kids to the need for better women's restrooms at the track to Kyle Petty's ponytail. When asked if he'd ever cut it off, Kyle's wife, Patty Petty, said no. She thinks it makes him look tougher. One item that's hot around the garage area recently, commemorative custom fishing rods given to the drivers by 53-year-old custom rod builder Jerry Nichols of Bingham, Maine. Nichols has built exclusive rods for Ricky Craven and Jeff Gordon and for the entire France family. On the celebrity music side of racing, here's a tip. A seasoned group led by former Leonard Skinner band member Mike Estes has just released a CD of racing songs this week nationally. Proceeds will benefit the Speedway Children's Charities. The group is Driving Sideways, and their CD of the same name features the hit song, What Else Would I Do on Sundays? The band was the star attraction in the Winston Cup Garage this past week, and we caught them on the Insider Cam.
What else would I do on Sunday? I gotta be at work on Monday. Only race them cars one day a week. What else would I do on Sunday? I gotta have some fun one day. If I ain't down at the track, I'm watching it on TV. Hey, check those new joints. I did.
Now it's off to the Atlanta track with the Insider Cam, so you stay tuned. For Illustrated Insider, I'm Claire B. Lang.
This week's Prime Star 500 was called the Motorcraft Quality Parts 500 in 1990. Dale Earnhardt was looking for his first win that year, starting from the pole. On lap 4, Terry Labonte lost an engine, while Jeff Bodine and Darrell Waltrip were in hot pursuit. But at times, Earnhardt was ahead by as much as 16 seconds. Ernie Irvin, in his first race for Morgan McClure, started 30th, but was in the top 5 by lap 40. Irvin kept the Kodak car on the lead lap all day. Then things turned bad for Earnhardt in the pits around lap 275. He was feeling sick. A broken air gun made things even worse. That gave Bodine the top spot. He was trying to get his first win for Junior Johnson. But the yellow was out on lap 319 when Rusty Wallace lost an engine. Most everyone made pit stops except for Morgan Shepherd, who was carrying the race sponsor's name as well. But with less than 10 laps to go, Bobby Hillin spun in turn 4. That set up a 2-lap dash for the checkers. Shepherd was out front, but when Alan Kowicki, who was a lap down, drifted high in turn 1, Earnhardt was able to go by on the inside for the lead and the win. It was Dale Earnhardt's 40th career victory.
You know, the guys worked hard. I got sick in the middle of the race, but you know, we got over that and came on and ran pretty good. Bodine, we had a bad pit stop, and Bodine got some lead, and then he just took one can of gas and he got a little more lead, and so that helped him out. And I was running. Well, fortunately, we could run him back down, and you know, matter of laps, we got back by him. You know, I didn't run him down, caught him, and I was going to work him a bit and then get by him, and you know, then we got the caution again, and we got 4 tires, and you know, we had to go from there.
So in the top 5, Morgan Shepherd had to settle for second. Ernie Irvin, who once again was in his freshman ride with Morgan McClure, finished 3rd. Ken Schrader was 4th, and filling out the top 5 on March 18, 1990 was Mark Martin driving for Jack Roush in the Folgers car.
Well, the NASCAR action is at the Atlanta Motor Speedway this weekend. We'll cover some of that for you next week right here on Inside NASCAR on TNN. Let's take a look at what else we have for you.
In just over a year's time, David Smith has run the gamut of professional highs and lows. He went from being named crew chief for 7-time Winston Cup champion Dale Earnhardt to shouldering much of the blame for the poor season the 3 team endured in '96. Well, now he's faced with a new challenge and a new outlook on the 97 season. We'll sit down and talk to the veteran wrench. With more than 45 cars showing up for a Winston Cup race each weekend, where do the teams find all the crew guys to work on the cars? We caught up with some of the top crew guys in the sport to see how they go about finding good help for the long, drawn-out NASCAR racing season. When you think of Hueytown, Alabama, names like Allison and Bonnet are sure to come to mind right off the bat. But BGN newcomer Doug Reed III is trying to revive the magic of the Alabama racing capital. Stephanie Boyd will introduce us to the third-generation pilot. All this coming up next week on Inside NASCAR.
Recently, there was something a little bit different on display, a clay sculpture of the Miller Lite pit crew, and that is the subject of this week's Inside NASCAR Profile.
Rusty Wallace may now be wearing the blue and white colors of Miller Lite, but his success in the black and gold Miller Genuine Draft car hasn't been forgotten. His pit crew on that car earned a reputation as one of, if not the best in the business, and that's why sports artist Ted Dupnock decided to pay tribute to the team with this quarter-scale sculpture.
It depicts the Winston Cup team of approximately late 1993, early 1994, when Rusty's team was the greatest pit crew on earth. And I sculpted them because I appreciated what those guys do out there. And I also wanted to do a sculpture that had a tremendous amount of action in a short amount of time, which with these guys in a 16-second pit stop, that certainly fit the bill.
Besides Wallace behind the wheel, the sculpture features real team members, part owner Don Miller, and former crew chief Buddy Parrott. Each figure stands about 18 inches tall, and Dupnock handcrafted the all-original piece with dentist-like tools.
In doing this sculpture, I kept a running total because I knew it would be a question that I would be asked a lot, and that is how many hours were put into it. And I kept a running log and checked every couple hours I'd put into it, and it ended up being about 2,200 hours of time. And that is creative time of actually working on the car and the men. There's 15 men in the sculpture. And I also have some time that's probably not even counted in creative thinking time to figure out how I was going to lay these men out and get them into a sculpture that wasn't so big we couldn't fit it into a place like this. And the sculpture's probably worth approximately $40,000 based on that creative time.
Dupnock has already sold or auctioned off several other racing-related sculptures, but he says this one is one of his favorites, and just one look is all it takes to see why.
Well, folks, that's all the time we have for this show. We hope you enjoyed it, and our thanks to Junior Donlevy and all the folks here at the Heilig Myers Racing Team for allowing us to come into their shops. You join us again here on TNN for more on Inside NASCAR.